Hi, welcome back to another episode of Anyone Can Paint. We're going to pick up on this ocean scene where we left off at. I'm going to have a wave that's starting to curl over as it's coming in towards here, so I need to darken up an area that's in here. So I'm just going to go into some pure blue. Just need a little bit. And we're just going to kind of darken up an area where this wave's kind of starting to curl over a little bit. It doesn't have to be really huge. Let me get a little bit more paint on my brush. And you don't necessarily need it straight across. We'll just have it kind of fade out a little bit. And that's really all we need for right there. And I'm going to clean that brush out. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to switch brushes. I'm going to use the small flat bristle brush, and we're going to go back and we're going to start working on some highlights back in our water. Now this is going to take a couple layers to do this. We're going to come in, we'll highlight it once, and we're going to go back and then we'll start incorporating some of the colors that we have in the sky, because certainly those would get reflected down in the water. But we're going to do our initial highlighting first. This is going to be some white and a little bit of blue to it. And you want to get a chiseled edge. Remember how you get that is you just put your brush in the paint after you've got it mixed, pull it through, turn it over, stick it back in the paint, pull it through again, and you'll get a nice little thin edge right on the edge of your brush. Now this is where, when we talked last week about putting this on thick so you can see the brush strokes, you can see value and color changes and things. This is where you really want to take advantage of those things. So if they can come up close, you can see right in here, for example, is a great example. You can see, and I just did this accidentally, but you can see that there's a brush stroke that kind of comes up and there's a color change that goes up just like that. And you can see other ones like that in here too. And those are the things that I go by. I just put a little bit of highlight on some of those, not all of those, but then you can see where you can go from there. But I take what's offered to you, when you first put this in. So chiseled edge, hold your hand back on your handle of your brush. You just want to go through and really lightly just start working out the tops of some of these waves that would be catching some light. See, like right here when I was talking about that wave, just come right over the top of that, just kind of incorporate a little bit of color there. I'm going to brighten this up a little bit more. I'm just going to add white to that existing color. There's still a little bit of blue, but it's mostly white. I'm doing this so maybe you can see a little bit easier. There we go. And I'm just barely touching. And I'm not really doing a stroke per se. I'm just kind of lightly touching and kind of dragging sometimes. Sometimes I lift the brush. Back here, these waves are going to, or the highlights are going to be a little bit closer together because it's further away. As we work closer, we're going to have a little bit more of a space between it because you would see more in between each wave. But you can see I'm just lightly going over this. And again, like always, and I tell you this, every painting we do, I say it every week, you don't want to cover up all of your underpainting. It is so important that that's in there. I often tell people in class that when you're doing the highlighting, that the underpainting or the dark is just as important as the underpainting is. And it truly is. Because if you don't have that underpainting showing, then all you've got is a light blob area that really doesn't mean a whole lot because you can't get any dimension or detail from it. But again, I'm just using really loose strokes, just kind of going over the top of some of these brush strokes that were created earlier. I'm just again going to reload, grabbing white, a little bit of blue, again chiseled edge, coming back, and all again we're just doing is redefining some of the waves. And see, even when you put it on a little thick, it almost looks like a wave that's just starting to curl over. So that's not a bad thing if that happens. And again, later, probably next week, we'll go through and we're we'll put the accent highlights on these waves, and that's where we'll incorporate some of these colors that are up in our sky. But this kind of just helps identify where those are at right now. I'm just, again, lightly touching the canvas, taking advantage, and paying attention to where I had made brush strokes from last week. When you get up here to the rocks, you just want to kind of softly work this in so you really don't see that hard edge of where the dark color hits the water. And in fact, next week we'll probably, when we're doing a little bit more detailing, maybe we'll put some little crashes up there where the water's coming, kind of hit the rocks and kind of splashes back off. Now this dark area that I just put in before we started this is where a wave is actually going to start to come in and start to curl over. So now remember that things that are further away are lighter in color and is darks, and they get darker as they come forward. Lights get brighter or lighter as they come forward. So if you just remember that whether it's a light or a dark, it just gets more intense. So on the top of this dark blue, I just got basically white, and I'm just going to go through, and I'm just tapping into the canvas. And the paint's kind of thick. I'm just reloading. Just going to reload again, a little bit more. And it just kind of fades out. Now you go in with your white again, and just wherever you want to determine where you got some water that's starting to curl over, you just go in and lightly pull this over. And ideally you want to be able to see some of that blue showing through. I'm going to reload and I'll be right back. But again, it's much, much better to do this too light and have to go back over it 2, maybe 3 times to get the look that you want than it is to go on with thick paint and just smudge it on there. There. Something like that. And that just kind of fades out. Just where it's starting to curl over. Now from there, I'm going to stick with the white that's on the brush. We're going to go right back to what we were doing back there. We're just going to start looking, hunting, and pecking for those waves. Okay, right in here is a great one. See how it kind of goes up and goes down? You get that wave feel. There's some more that are over here. Those are what you want to look for. Just kind of search those out. Because as long as when you first put those in, you did them nice and loose and free and just kind of let it happen, I promise you they're going to be there. And just like always, a lot of this is, how much pressure you put on the canvas with your brush. If you do it lighter, sometimes you get nice little value changes they're kind of there, but you don't see them as much. I'm just going to reload and I'll be right back. And other times you want to hit it a little bit firmer so you can get a pretty good stroke out of it. But sometimes I'm just barely touching the canvas, and other times, again, I'm putting on a pretty good stroke of paint, like right there. Again, we'll just kind of work this, soften that edge for right now. I'm going to reload, I'll be right back. And again, I'm just kind of hunting and pecking. I mean, you can see how this really gives that sense that it goes back, and it's because you've got light against the dark, dark against the light, light against the dark, and it's just a series of contrasts as you go back. And every time you have that in there, that tricks the eye to think that there's distance. A little thick. But as always, too, what you want to guard against is it's really, really easy to have way too much of this. And that's one thing that you constantly are going to have to fight. Because as you start putting highlights on and things start to take a little bit of shape and dimension, and you're starting to really kind of see it coming alive, it's kind of like, man, this is really cool. This is really working. And then automatically you think, well, the more I put on this, the better it's going to look. And that is so far from being wrong. And it's hard. I remember I was always struggling with that because it was kind of like, oh, this is really looking like a mountain or whatever. And you would, like I said, I kept thinking that, man, I just need to put more of this on and it's going to look even better. But it gets to a point where you just go a little bit too far and it gets to be kind of busy and it stops looking so good. So you've got to determine when's a good time to start and stop. And it does take willpower because you're always fighting that thing. It's like going, man, just a little bit more, and it's like, oh. And you'll know because you will ruin some paintings because you'll say, man, I should have stopped. And you will develop a willpower. Not that it's any easier, but you will recognize the benefit of stopping, even though you want to keep going. Okay, I'm going to step out just for a second so I can see how much is here and if I'm missing anything. And I'll be right back. That looks pretty good. I think there's just enough in there. I'm going to soften some of these. Just so there's not so much dark, but I'm not doing enough where I'm taking the dark away. I'm just kind of softening up the dark here and there. All right. Alrighty. I think that's enough for the water for now. Again, we're going to go back next week, and when we do accent highlighting, we'll start incorporating on the top of some of these waves some of the colors that are in the sky. Actually, we don't even have to clean out our brush. We're going to start working on highlighting some of the rocks. And this is really, even though they look different, but it's the same process as when I just blob rocks in anyways. We've got edges to start with, but how and where you take those are totally up to you. But you want to have a series of layering going on here. So I'm going to start with that white. I'm going to get a little bit of brown. And again, next week when we get to the accent part, I will probably incorporate some of the oranges and things that are in the sky on some of the rocks. But for now, we're just going to go with this white and brown just to kind of identify things. Again, I'm using the small flat bristle brush, holding it way back on the end of the handle. Now you just want to go in and identify where you want your rocks to go. And so I'm going to add a little bit more brown. I'll be right back. It's kind of fighting the sky a little bit. There we go. And just like with rocks, you don't want to cover up all your underpainting. Now I'm just going to have that go like this, and this rock maybe cuts in front of that. And then I'm going to have another one here. And again, I'm just looking at brush strokes. I'm following, I have the brush stroke kind of goes back like this, and that's actually how I picked that one up. And that's why, too, is if you were to do this painting over and over, if you follow some of these techniques that I've been talking about, your paintings will never, ever look the same. Just because if you're following brush strokes that you made in the underpainting stage, there's no way it can look the same, because it's always going to be different. Now this one's going to kind of come down maybe like this. I'm just going to put a little bit on the back side just so you can see that it cuts in front of there. Now we'll put a little bit more highlight on this. Again, not much. You want to skip around, allowing some dark to show through. And then we'll have a little guy here. I'm going to reload. I'll be right back. Maybe this one comes down like that. Again, with rocks, you always want to identify the outside shape. That's your first stroke. That identifies the size and the shape of the rock. Then as you start working back in from there is when you want to use light pressure sometimes, heavier pressure other times, and that's how you end up getting a little bit more color there, less color there, no color there. But you can get that sense that it puts a lot of dimension into it, makes it three-dimensionalized. I have this one kind of cut over like that. Just going to reload. I'll be right back. Again, I'm just following some brush strokes. I'm just going to reload again. Just kind of bouncing around, making sure you don't cover up all your dark. Then we're just going to work our way down and around. Again, it's really a thing about pressure. It's how hard you push in or how light that you back off on. That allows you to get all these little details that are in there. And if you're doing this painting, if you don't want these many rocks, certainly just make your rocks larger and you won't have as many. Or as I know most of you want to do, you want to more rocks in there than even I have. thing that I guess to watch out for as you're doing rocks, and this is true not only in this painting but all of them, is just make sure you're not duplicating the same size and shape over and over and over. It's a little bit more natural when there's a little bit difference, you know, angles and shapes and sizes and things like that. And this one, I think we'll just have kind of cutting across back there. And again, I only want to put enough of that on there so you can tell that the rock cuts in front of there. You still want all your detailing on the sunlit side. I just put a little bit more brown in this color just to kind of break it up a little bit. You can always add a little bit of blue if you want. That'll gray it down a little. Again, I'm just reloading when you don't see me up there. And if it's easier for you after you've put on your first initial stroke, if it's easier for you to wipe some of that paint out of your brush when you're doing this, because maybe you just don't have a good brush control yet, or you haven't developed a feel for softening and, you know, light pressure and dark pressure. If you just wipe some of that paint off on a piece of paper towel, you'll kind of get the same kind of thing. So just, again, make your, you know, your first initial strokes. And like, again, at this point, you can just wipe it out. Then you can come back in and soften this up. If that makes it easier, certainly feel free to do that. But over the course of time, you're going to develop a feel for this, and you'll get a touch where you can lighten it up. Even with a lot of paint on your brush, you'll be able to barely hit the canvas and kind of get the effect that you want. It'll come in time, though. I'm going to do a little one there. I think I have this one cut in front of it, so I'm just going to bring that highlight down a little further. See, automatically it pushes that back. And this just needs a little bit. I'm just going to put a little bit of blue to this just to kind of grade down, just to kind of change it up a little. On this side, the light's going to catch the right-hand side of those. We're almost got these rascals done. I don't know if we're going to finish it during our allotted time or not, but as we're running the credits, I'm just going to probably still be working on these, so next week we can just kind of focus on some other things. So now let's make this one stick out a little bit here. This may look like this. Cut right across. And then light pressure, heavy pressure sometimes. Just kind of change it up. And this is as far as we're going to get this week. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate you tuning in every week. Now remember, if you've got any photographs that you've taken on vacation or around the house, or whatever like that, that you think might make a good painting, please send those in or email them to me. We'll take a look at them, and maybe one day we'll be doing a painting of your photographs. Also, if you do any kind of painting at home and you'd like me to take a look at it, give you any ideas or suggestions, please send those to me too. You can either mail them or email them, and I'll get back with you on any hints or little tips you could do to make it maybe a little bit better or get it towards the, how you want it to look. Remember that you can do this. I promise you can do this. Anyone can paint. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.